The 1970s were the golden years of muscle cars, big engines, bold looks, and loud exhausts. But not every ride from that time aged well. Some are now just shiny junk. These are the 20 worthless muscle cars now in 2025. Number 20, 1976 Chevrolet Camaro Rally Sport. Back in 1976, the Chevrolet Camaro Rally Sport looked like a dream on wheels. It had bright yellow paint, a long front nose, and a sporty body that made people stop and stare. But fast forward to the year 2025, and this once cool muscle car just doesn't hold up. You see, in 1975, the Rally Sport became more about looks than power. It was mostly a paint and sticker package. That flat black paint that looks so tough, it didn't age well. After almost 50 years, it fades, cracks, and is nearly impossible to keep shiny. The bumpers were painted too, which sounded fun at the time, but now they're chipped, rusty, and just plain sad to look at. The 1976 version didn't bring much change. Sure, there was a little silver trim on the back if you picked the fancy model, but the rest stayed the same. Under the hood, the base engine was a small six-cylinder that had trouble keeping up with modern traffic. Even the bigger V8 engine only made 165 horsepower. That's less than many small cars today. It sounds like a muscle car, but it moves like a turtle. Worse yet, parts are getting harder to find, and fixing one of these isn't cheap. The brakes became power-assisted that year, which sounds nice, but by today's standards, they still feel weak. And even though these cars were popular in their time, they just don't drive well anymore. The steering feels loose, the ride is rough, and it burns way too much fuel. So it might look cool in old photos, but it's not worth your money today. Some things are better left in the past. Number 19, 1978 Ford Mustang II King Cobra. The 1978 Ford Mustang II King Cobra had a flashy name, a giant snake sticker on the hood, and wild racing stripes down the side. Only a little more than 4,000 of these were made, and they came with a V8 engine to sound fast and tough. But fast forward today, and the King Cobra is more of a show-off than a performer. Sure, it looked mean with its deep front spoiler and sporty paint job, but that was about it. Underneath all that flash was a heavy little car with very little bite. It didn't corner well, it leaned too much in turns, and it wasn't even that quick. Even back in its day, it was just barely stronger than other cars in its class. And let's talk about comfort. This car wasn't exactly smooth. The ride was rough, and the seats, especially the ones with the striped Fresno cloth, looked like they came from a fancy couch, but didn't feel that great on a long drive. The inside had pinstripes, extra lights, and even vanity pockets, but none of that helps today when most of the parts are worn or falling apart. Some versions came with a T-top roof, which sounded fancy back then, but today those glass panels leak, rattle, and cost a fortune to fix. Replacement parts for this car are hard to find, and most mechanics don't want to deal with it. The King Cobra might still turn heads at car shows, but driving it every day in 2025, not a good idea. It's a muscle car that tried to roar, but ended up whispering. In today's world, it's better left parked in the past. Number 18, 1977 Pontiac Firebird Esprit. It looked smooth and stylish. Back in 1977, the Pontiac Firebird Esprit turned heads. With its long hood, low stance, and gentle curves, it seemed like the kind of car you'd see cruising by palm trees on a sunny highway. It even came in special colors like light blue and buckskin gold, with comfy seats and shiny chrome trim. But now that calm cruiser just doesn't make much sense anymore. Under the hood, it carried a small V8 engine, barely enough power to call it a muscle car. It didn't have the speed of the Trans Am, and it couldn't match the handling of modern sports cars. Even back then, it was more about looks than performance. The ride was soft and slow. Try taking a corner fast, and it leans like a tired boat. The brakes were average, the steering felt loose, and even with things like air conditioning and power windows, it just doesn't keep up with today's world. Everything about it feels old, not charming old, just worn out. The parts are another headache. Some trim pieces like the special wheels or steering wheel from the fancy versions are nearly impossible to replace. And if you're lucky enough to find them, they cost a fortune. Paint fades, plastic cracks, And those once beautiful interiors now smell like old garages. It may still turn a few heads at small car shows, but as a real driver's car, the Esprit has lost its spark. What once looked like a movie star now feels more like a background prop. Number 17, 1979 Mercury Cougar XR7. There once was a time when the 1979 Mercury Cougar XR7 was called fancy. It had soft seats, shiny trim, and a name that sounded wild. People liked the big hood, the swooping roof, and the way it looked like it belonged in a car parade. It even had a pretend spare tire shape pressed into the back trunk lid, like it was trying to copy the big classy cars of the day. But just because it looked proud didn't mean it drove proudly. Under all that flash was a small V8 engine that only made 133 horsepower. That might have sounded good back then, but today it's about the same as a minivan. The car was heavy too, which made it slow. Press the gas pedal, and instead of jumping forward, it kind of groaned and crept along. The steering felt loose, the brakes were soft, and sharp turns were never its strong point. Even sitting inside felt like being in a living room with wheels. It was full of fake wood, thick carpets, and soft cushions. But the fun of driving, that wasn't part of the deal. The Cougar XR7 was built more for gentle cruising than action, which doesn't make it exciting today. Over time, the vinyl roofs start peeling, the trim falls off, and all those fancy touches become a pain to fix. Some parts are nearly impossible to find, and mechanics often roll their eyes at the word Cougar. What used to feel rich now feels tired. It's a big, slow cat with worn-out claws, more of a couch on wheels than a true muscle car. And that. Number 16, 1974 AMC Javelin AMX. The 1974 AMC Javelin AMX, with wide stripes, a long nose, and sharp curves, it seemed like a muscle car ready for action. People said it was different, but being different doesn't always mean being good. By the time this car rolled off the line, the golden age of muscle had already ended. Its V8 engine made 245 horsepower, but that was nothing special anymore. Other cars had already backed off the power to meet new rules. Gas was expensive, and the fun was fading. Even with that big engine, the Javelin AMX felt heavy, not fast. The inside had bucket seats and a center console, which sounded sporty. But when you drove it, the truth came out. The steering felt soft. The brakes needed effort. The ride bounced too much over every bump. It may have looked like a race car, but it moved more like a sleepy cruiser. Even the shape, once praised for being smooth and clean, now just looks bulky. That long body and sharp back end make parking a pain and turning worse. The shiny chrome and vinyl trim didn't hold up over time either. They peel, rust, and cost way too much to fix. Try to find parts and you'll learn how rare doesn't always mean valuable. Collectors might love the story, they might cheer for the underdog, but for most people, the 1974 Javelin AMX just isn't worth the trouble. Number 15, 1977 Oldsmobile Cutlass 442. It once had a name that sounded strong, 442. Back in 1977, the Oldsmobile Cutlass 442 had a sloped nose like a race car and a big V8 engine under the hood. The body was wide and heavy, with long doors and thick bumpers. Some came with fancy bucket seats and shiny badges on the side. People thought it looked cool, but by then, it had already lost its muscle. The V8 engine in the 1977 model was large, 403 cubic inches, but only made 185 horsepower. That's not much for something that big and heavy. It took more fuel than fun to move it forward. Step on the gas and the power felt tired, like it had been used up in the earlier years. The body was chunky and didn't turn well. Try to take a corner fast, and it leaned hard, like a couch on wheels. The brakes were soft, and the ride felt floaty. It wasn't built for fun roads. It was built to look like a memory of something better. Over time, rust ate away at the edges. Chrome bumpers faded. The plastic trim cracked. The once bold stripes peeled like old stickers. The doors got heavy to close. Seats sagged. Some had dents that never got fixed. Others had engines that coughed and rattled instead of rumbling smoothly. The name 442 once meant a quick and powerful ride. But in 1977, it was mostly just a name. left over from better days. It looked like a muscle car from a distance, but up close it was more bark than bite. Number 14. 1978 Plymouth Roadrunner. Sometimes a car wears a name too big for what it can do. The 1978 Plymouth Roadrunner is one of those. Under the hood was a big engine, a 360 cubic inch V8 with a 4-barrel carburetor. Sounds strong, right? But back then, power was being squeezed away. This big motor made only 170 horsepower. That's not much for a car that tried to act like a muscle machine. It was all bark, no bite. However, the body looked flashy with bright stripes and wide spoilers, but the soul of the car was missing. It shared most of its parts with a plain Plymouth Velar. The real muscle had faded, replaced by soft seats and fake toughness. Even the handling was sloppy. Try to take a sharp turn, and you'd feel like you were driving a sofa. Buyers noticed. In its first years, Roadrunners sold by the thousands, but by 1978, fewer than 2,000 people wanted one. Even with rare options like a T-bar roof and special paint, it couldn't hide what it really was, a car pretending to be something it wasn't. Some say it's special, but being rare doesn't always mean being good. This Roadrunner came from a time when rules and gas prices changed cars forever. The muscle cars became weak, and no decals could save them. What was left behind was a heavy shell with a fading echo of the past. Number 13. 1976 Chevrolet Camaro. The 1976 Chevrolet Camaro had wide fenders, a low stance, and that long hood shape that made people turn their heads. But once you looked past the style, there wasn't much muscle under the surface. The standard engine was a small 6-cylinder, just 250 cubic inches. It didn't growl, it didn't roar, it barely moved. Even the new V8, which was 305 cubic inches, only made 140 horsepower. That number might sound okay, but for a car that looked like a racer, it felt like a disappointment. The biggest engine, 350 cubic inches, gave just 165 horsepower. That still wasn't enough to make this heavy car feel fast. You could push your foot to the floor and feel nothing much. Chevrolet added power brakes for all V8 models that year. That helped with stopping, but not with speed. No matter how shiny the paint or how wide the tires, the performance wasn't there. Even with 10 new colors and extra options like air conditioning or automatic transmissions, the heart of the car stayed weak. Most buyers picked the Sport Coupe version. More than 92,000 were made. That made it common, too common. With so many out there, prices dropped, and over time, rust and wear hit hard. Whether it had a manual stick or an automatic shifter, the results were the same. A worn-down car that couldn't keep up. Number 12. 1975 Pontiac Firebird. The 1975 Pontiac Firebird proved in the worst way that looking fast and being fast are two very different things. It had a wide stance, a sloped nose, and a rear window that now curved along the sides. It looked stylish from the outside, but deep down, it had lost its strength. The powerful engines that once made the Firebird special were gone. No more Super Duty motor, no more big 400 turbo hydromatic transmission. What drivers got instead was a smaller, lighter 350 automatic. It worked, sure, but it didn't bring excitement. Then came the new engine block, called 500557. It had less metal and less nickel inside. That made it cheaper and easier to build, but also easier to crack. It was not the kind of engine you wanted in a car that was once a legend on the street. Even the so-called high-output engine didn't live up to its name. It was a 455 cubic inch V8, but Pontiac stuffed it with soft parts and a tight exhaust. It only made 200 horsepower. That was barely enough to move the heavy Firebird with any real energy. To make things worse, the body lost its old sharp lines. The new shape looked smooth, but didn't help the car drive better. The big glass in the back might have looked fancy, but it added more weight and did nothing for speed. And here's what really mattered. This Firebird couldn't even keep up with slower cars from years before. It took more than 16 seconds just to run a quarter mile. That's not muscle, that's disappointment. Number 11, 1978 AMC Matador. In the final days of the muscle car era, some cars faded quietly. The 1978 AMC Matador Looked like it wanted to impress, with soft fabric seats and shiny fake wood in the wagons. But once the doors shut and the engine turned on, it became clear. This car had problems. It all started under the hood. The base engine was a 258 cubic inch inline six-cylinder. It made only 120 horsepower. That's barely enough to move a car of this size with confidence. If drivers wanted more, they could step up to a 360 cubic inch V8, but that only gave them 140 horsepower. Still not enough to make the car feel fast. It had some torque, but the power just wasn't there. Inside, it felt like a throwback. A basic radio, plain switches, and not much else. Sure, there was vinyl on the wagons and soft seats, but nothing felt modern. By the time this car was rolling off the line, it was already behind. Sales told the rest of the story. They dropped by 2/3 compared to the year before. Buyers walked away, and the ones who stayed didn't always know what they were getting. Some cars came with floor shifters, others had the gear stick on the steering column. Some had bucket seats, and others had long bench seats. It all felt random, like the people building the car couldn't make up their minds. Then there was the coupe. It tried to look elegant and sporty, but the long doors, frameless windows, and strange nose gave it an odd look. It didn't match the sedan or the wagon. The whole thing felt off. Number 10. 1976 Dodge Aspen RT. The 1976 Dodge Aspen RT is one of those cars that fell apart fast. From the outside, it wore stripes and badges like a true muscle machine. But under the hood and behind the wheel, things didn't feel right. The problems started early. The car was rushed into dealerships, and it showed. The front fenders rusted quickly, even in places with little rain. Paint came off like old stickers. It wasn't just about looks either. Safety became a real concern. The front suspension could fail if the brakes were pushed hard. Fuel lines sometimes rubbed against moving belts, which could lead to fires. Some seat belts even popped open during hard stops. Now that's not muscle, that's risky. And the issues kept coming. Battery acid sometimes leaked and ate through brake lines. That meant slow, weak stops. Then came the worst part, stalling. The Aspen RT had a habit of shutting off while in traffic. That left drivers scared and stuck in the middle of the road. Even the engine options didn't help much. The base model came with a 225 cubic inch slant 6. Buyers could move up to a 318 or a 360 cubic inch V8, but even the largest engines struggled to make the car feel fast. The sound was there, but the power wasn't. The design was also confused. The Aspen tried to be new, but most of its parts came from old cars. The coupe sat on a 108.7-inch wheelbase. The sedan and wagon were longer, at 112.7 inches, but none of them drove smoothly. Bumps felt sharp, the steering felt loose, and the final blow? Over 1 million Aspens were recalled within a year. That's not a strong car. That's just a big mistake with racing stripes. Number 9. 1975 Ford Torino. The 1975 Ford Torino looked tough on the outside, but the magic was long gone. A few small changes were made, like a new grille, but everything else stayed the same. And that was the problem. Everything felt stuck in the past. What really hurt the Torino was what happened under the hood. To follow the new clean air laws, Ford added a part called a catalytic converter. That might have helped the environment, but it didn't help the engine. The power dropped a lot. The car became heavier too, which made it slower and harder to enjoy. Imagine trying to race while carrying a backpack full of bricks. That's what it felt like behind the wheel. The engines didn't make things better. Buyers had to choose between two versions of the 351 cubic inch engine, one called the M and one called the W. But neither had much muscle left. And the real letdown? No more manual shifting. Every single Torino came with the same automatic transmission. That took away the fun for anyone who loved to feel the car's power with each gear change. Ford tried to add comfort by making power steering and brakes standard. But those upgrades couldn't fix the car's heavy, clumsy feel. Even the Gran Torino Sport, once a standout model, now looked just like every other version. It no longer turned heads or raised excitement. People noticed. Sales dropped to under 200,000 that year. That was a huge drop for a car that once filled roads. The Torino had become a big car in a world that was starting to want smaller, smarter, and more fun rides. Number 8. 1979 Chevrolet Malibu Classic. Back in the late 1970s, cars were changing. The 1979 Chevrolet Malibu Classic, on the outside, looked nice with bright chrome, smooth lines, and a soft landau top that tried to scream fancy. But under all that shine, there was not much power to be proud of. Under the hood sat a 305 cubic inch V8 engine. That might sound strong, but it really wasn't. It had only a small 4-barrel carburetor, which meant the engine didn't get much air or fuel to work with. It was paired with a slow 3-speed automatic transmission, and the rear gears were made for calm cruising, not quick speeds. The 2.29 gear ratio made the car feel tired every time the gas pedal was pressed. Inside, the Malibu tried to look nice. Black vinyl seats, a dash with fake wood trim, and a steering wheel with cruise buttons made it feel almost modern for the time. But it was all just for show. The plastic, the basic dials, and the plain layout didn't bring any real joy to driving. Sure, it had a tape player and even a CD changer in the trunk later on, but none of that made the ride feel exciting. Underneath, the story stayed the same. The frame was strong, but the brakes in the back were still drum style, not disc. The car had power steering and power brakes, but the handling was soft. The ride was floaty, and it leaned too much in corners. Even the sound of the car was quiet. Dual exhaust couldn't make it dominate. It was just a slow, quiet ride that never made a mark. Number 7. 1976 Pontiac Ventura. Back in 1976, the Pontiac Ventura tried to look fresh with clean lines, a sharp grille, and a smooth shape, which gave it a neat look. But once you got past the surface, things started to fall apart, especially if you were hoping for a real muscle car. First, let's talk power. The engines were the biggest letdown. The base engine was a 231 cubic inch V6, and while it sounded fair, it was slow and tired. Want more power? The optional 260 cubic inch V8 barely made a difference. There were even larger options, like the 305 and the 301 cubic inch V8s, but somehow the car still felt like it was dragging its feet. Some unlucky versions even came with a 152 cubic inch Iron Duke 4-cylinder engine. That one sipped gas, sure, but it also sipped all the fun. There was a 5-speed manual transmission offered with the V8, which sounds exciting. But here's the truth. Fewer than 700 cars ever had it. So even when the car had a chance to be special, barely anyone gave it a shot. And now finding parts for that setup is like chasing a ghost. The Ventura rode on the same frame as the Chevrolet Nova, but it didn't get any of the thrill. The handling was soft, the steering was loose, and the brakes felt like they needed a nap. Inside, things looked plain. The seats, the trim, even the dashboard, all average. Nothing made you say, wow. Some versions had air conditioning and an AM/FM radio, but that wasn't rare in the mid-70s. Number 6. 1978 Plymouth Roadrunner. The 1978 Plymouth Roadrunner was just pretending to be tough. With its bold stripes, shiny badges, and sporty bucket seats, it tried hard to copy the real muscle cars from years before. But under the surface, it was more family car than street racer. This Roadrunner shared its base with the Dodge Aspen, a plain car built for quiet drives, not thrilling ones. Even the so-called performance model came with a small 318 cubic inch V8 engine. It sounded good on paper, but in real life, it was weak and slow. Compared to the roaring Roadrunners of the late 1960s, this version was a big letdown. Speaking of power, there was a bigger 360 cubic inch engine offered too, but it was rare and still didn't have much bite. It only made 170 horsepower, not nearly enough for a car that looked like it should fly. The steering was slow, the ride was soft, and the handling felt sleepy. Worse than the speed was the quality. These cars rusted fast. Metal faded, paint peeled, and parts wore out early. Doors creaked, dashboards cracked, and seats got tired long before they should have. Also, fuel economy didn't help either. Even with a smaller engine, the Roadrunner drank gas quickly and still needed regular fuel. It wasn't smart for daily driving or long trips. Beyond this, there were the numbers. Over 1 million Volares were sold, but only a few were roadrunners. Most drivers skipped it, and for good reason. It didn't offer the thrill of a true muscle car, just the outfit of one. Number 5. 1977 Chevrolet Monza Mirage. The 1977 Chevrolet Monza Mirage came dressed like a race car. It wore wide red and blue stripes, had big flared fenders, and even a spoiler in the back. But once the engine started, all the excitement faded away. This car had a 305 cubic inch V8 engine. That sounds like something powerful, but it wasn't. The engine struggled to move the heavy body. The 4-speed manual transmission helped a little, but it still felt slow. Pressing the gas didn't bring thunder. It brought noise and waiting. Moreover, the Mirage was made for only 1 year. General Motors worked with another company to add all those race-like body parts. They weren't metal, they were plastic. And while they looked cool at first, they didn't hold up well over time. The paint faded, the stickers peeled, the edges cracked. Speaking of interior, the car was just as full of big ideas with small results. Red vinyl seats looked bright, but felt stiff. The dashboard was simple and plain. It didn't have fancy gauges or clever touches. The whole thing felt rushed, like it was made to look fun, but not built to last. Beyond this, the Monza Mirage was based on the same body as the Vega, a car known for trouble. Even with its better suspension and fatter tires, the Mirage still handled like an old compact. It bounced too much on rough roads and squeaked around corners. The parts weren't strong, and rust came quickly unless the car was kept inside. So it looked ready for the racetrack but was better suited for a parking lot. Number 4. 1973 Dodge Dart Sport. The 1973 Dodge Dart Sport came with a bulging hood scoop, racing stripes, and a name that promised speed. But once you got behind the wheel, that promise faded fast. This Dart came with a 340 cubic inch V8 engine, which sounds exciting. But thanks to heavy emissions rules and a bulky build, it didn't move like a real muscle car. The power was there somewhere, but getting to it felt slow and stiff. It didn't jump off the line or roar down the road. Instead, it felt heavy and tired, even when brand new. Inside, it was just as plain. The bucket seats looked sporty, but weren't very comfortable. The radio worked, sure, but there wasn't much else to make it feel special. It had a basic dash, simple knobs, and little to no style inside. You'd expect more from something wearing a scoop and stripes. One of the biggest letdowns was how quickly these cars aged. Paint faded fast. Parts rusted unless the car was locked away in a perfect garage. Many owners saw cracks in the dash, soft floors from moisture, and rust creeping along the fenders. Even with low miles, these cars needed lots of work just to stay running. The Dart Sport also came with something called the Direct Connection Package, full of race-ready parts and manuals. But very few people used them. Most were just left in boxes, and the cars stayed stock, slow, and forgotten. Number 3. 1975 Mercury Montego MX Brougham. The 1975 Mercury Montego MX Brougham, with a long body, a shiny grille, and a soft vinyl roof, promised comfort and class. But this big car had very little to show. Under the cover, it offered a V8 engine. That sounds strong, but the size of the car made it slow to move. Even with the gas pedal pushed all the way down, it felt heavy and sleepy. It could barely hit 60 miles per hour in under 10 seconds, and that was on a good day with no passengers or hills. Additionally, the ride was soft, but not in a good way. The suspension floated too much, and every bump made the car bounce. On tight turns, it leaned like a boat in water. Power steering helped, but it still felt more like driving a couch than a muscle car. Beyond this, the Montego had a wide bench seat, plastic wood on the dash, and a lot of soft vinyl. Air conditioning was an option, but not always cold. The radio worked if you were lucky. It looked nice at first, but it wore out quickly, and the parts didn't hold up well over time. Plus, gas mileage was awful. One short trip could drain the tank. In the middle of the 1970s gas crisis, this was a big problem. Owners spent more time filling up than enjoying the drive. Even though it once led a race as a pace car, that didn't make it fast. Number 2. 1976 Chrysler Cordoba. The 1976 Chrysler Cordoba, a fanciest muscle car, had long doors, shiny chrome, and soft seats that were called Corinthian leather. That name sounded special, like something from a faraway land. But it was not from Greece, it was just regular vinyl made in New Jersey. Well, this car was big. It stretched across the street like a giant sofa on wheels. But for all its size, it did not go fast. The big engine, a 400 cubic inch V8, only made 185 horsepower. That might sound like a lot, but the car weighed so much that it moved slowly and drank fuel like it was thirsty all the time. The interesting part is that the Cordoba shared its bones with smaller, older Dodges from the early 1960s. By 1976, those same bones had been stuffed into a bigger suit. The ride felt soft, but too soft. It leaned in turns, floated over bumps, and made sharp driving feel like a chore. The inside looked nice at first. The gauges were clean, the dash was neat, and the radio worked. But even the seats, with all their fancy names, didn't feel as special as promised. They were just regular padded vinyl, dressed up with words. Even though it tried to act like a muscle car, the Cordoba was more about show than go. The fake leather, slow engine, and heavy frame made it feel more like a tired cruiser than a real muscle machine. Number 1. 1976 Pontiac Sunbird. In the end, the 1976 Pontiac Sunbird promised fun and power, like a real muscle car in a small package. But that promise faded fast once the wheels started turning. Now let's talk about the engine. It had enough torque to move the car, but not enough to excite anyone. It was quiet, slow, and ran out of breath before it could reach high speeds. The engine made noise, but not the kind you'd cheer for. Further, the Sunbird came with a 5-speed manual, which sounded exciting, but it didn't help much. The gears felt heavy, and the car's rear axle was geared for fuel savings, not speed. Shifting through the gears didn't make the car faster. It just made you more tired. Even with good tires and some extra suspension parts, the Sunbird handled corners like a nervous deer. It understeered through turns, and on country roads, it felt unsure of itself. The brakes were okay, but the whole car felt out of balance, too heavy, too soft, and not enough power. Inside, the car looked neat and clean. It had space and comfort, with a smart-looking dashboard and good visibility. But that didn't make up for the way it drove. The Sunbird had the look, but not the spirit. Like a picture that seems real from far away, but up close, the details didn't match the promise. That's all for today. Which one do you think is the biggest letdown? Drop a comment, hit like if you enjoyed the ride, and don't forget to subscribe for more forgotten classics and car fails.